welcome to episode 30 of the Gambots podcast. I'm your host, Eric, and this is my co-host.
It's Christian.
On this week's episode, Christian recently finished season 3 of the Santa Clarita Diet. I watched the documentary Legend of Cocaine Island, Christian saw the newly released Shazam, and I platinumed Nier Automata. But first, Christian, you finished season 3 of Santa Clarita Diet. Now, I don't know really much about this at all. What is this show?
It is a Netflix original, so season 3 came out last week, and I was pretty excited to dive into it because I really liked seasons 1 and 2. It stars Drew Barrymore and Timothy Olyphant, and Drew Barrymore is a zombie realtor in California.
So is this a comedy, I'm guessing?
Yeah, for the most part. So the first episode in season 1 starts with her getting real sick, and then she doesn't realize she's dead, basically. And so over the course of the first couple episodes, they figure out, oh no, she's a zombie, and life kind of takes it from there. It's a real strange show, as it centers mostly around just kind of day-to-day life, and a lot of the comedy is what you would expect to see in like a family sitcom about just how benignly dysfunctional a family is, and like the daughter's a little rebel and the parents are arguing about nitpicky things, except the nitpicky things they're arguing about is whether or not they can eat the neighbors. So it's a really funny show. It juxtaposes the normalcy of like the conversations that they're having with the content, which is just so like bonkers out there. Like, oh, you killed your partner, now he's in the basement in a freezer, and you're slowly eating him throughout the week. And it's like, oh well, I know in season 2 they have an argument in the middle of the desert about like Tupperware lids, and like, oh well, I couldn't find the lid to this, and now we're gonna have to throw it away, and then we're gonna find the lid to this in a week. And it's just such a normal conversation, but the reason they're arguing about it is because there's a dead body in the container that they're trying to bury. Like, it's very strange, but in a really good way.
Oh, so just hearing the basic premise of it, it reminds me a little bit of iZombie. Did you ever have a chance to watch that?
I've seen bits and pieces of it, yeah.
So it's not entirely one-to-one, but that one basically stars a girl who becomes a zombie and is a coroner, and she gets her the brains from dead bodies that come through, and then she solves crime. So they obviously differ a little bit, but it's interesting to see another zombie show with somewhat of a similar premise. So how was season 3?
Pretty good. It focuses on a new facet. Well, a couple really. They're being hunted by a secret society called the Knights of Serbia, who have made it their like life's mission to eradicate the undead. And so now that they find out that there's an undead woman in Santa Clarita, California, and they come to town looking. There's another facet where one of the characters that's been in it since the beginning finds out her secret and now believes that she's a god, or like a messenger from God, because she's immortal and she can bring people back from the dead, by turning them into zombies, but she can still do that. And so now she kind of becomes like a zealot, obsessively trying to serve Drew Barrymore's higher purpose, even though she's just trying to eat people to survive. They also have to grapple with the idea that she's going to live forever is something that gets brought up in this, and they're trying to decide how to handle immortality, kind of.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So it seems like it's a horror comedy blend on those. How do you think they handle those storylines?
Really well. Like I said, I really like this show. I think it balances its themes pretty nicely. The daughter has a lot of fun stories. She's just a very fun character. She's, like I said, she's the rebel, and so she's trying to like make an impact in her life and try to figure out what she wants to do with her life, while also having to deal with a mom who's kind of a serial killer and a dad who's just kind of swept up in everything. And at a certain point she starts blowing things up, which is always fun. So it's a good ride. I would definitely recommend this for anyone who's looking for like a fun show it's a little more than just kind of dumb comedy. Like you do have to watch it, but you don't have to be like into it to really enjoy it. It's a casual show, but not like a pick it up anywhere and watch any episode kind of casual.
So you mentioned that Drew Barrymore's in this, and that's I think an interesting name to hear, because I really don't know any movies or TV shows that she has been in recent memory.
Yeah, I can't really remember the last thing I saw her in before this. I mean, I've this is now season 3, so I've seen her in this for like 2.5 years now. But that's kind of it. That's like you said, in recent memory, anyway.
How is she in it?
She's good. Timothy Oliphant's my favorite, but they're both really good. They play off each other really well. They work really well together. They have a good on screen chemistry.
So how's the supporting cast in this?
It's pretty good. It's not super wide. The supporting cast tends to die off. Joel McHale is in it for 3 seasons so far. He plays like the other realtor who's their arch nemesis. Natalie Morales plays the sheriff. She does a really good job. The biggest one for me was Nathan Fillion, who actually dies in the first episode. He's like the partner, the realtor partner that they kill by accident, and then he comes back as a zombie then in later on, and he is just hysterical in this. He's basically just a head, I think, that they stick on a vase, and he just hangs out in their basement and berates them a little bit. But in this one, he's decayed, and so I think they replaced him. I don't think it's Nathan Fillion anymore because the head is all rotted and it sounds different. And they kind of explain it away by saying like, "Oh, a piece of your voice box must have fallen apart or something because you sound a little different now." But I'm pretty sure it's not Nathan Fillion anymore.
It's a pretty interesting way to get rid of a character. Just decompose their head.
Yeah, but I mean, it kind of works. I meant to go on IMDb and I kind of forgot, but I'm pretty sure it's not Nathan Fillion anymore.
So, before you said you really like the show and you recommend it, do you think this is one of the better Netflix original TV series?
Yeah, like Netflix originals go out in all directions. Like they've done a little of everything, but comedy wise, I think this was a big hit. The only other major comedy of theirs that I've watched, I think, was the Arrested Development season 4 like continuation, and ooh, that was not good.
Well, I know you like BoJack Horseman too, but I guess I don't know if that's an original series or not.
It is, yeah. Yeah, BoJack's a comedy. It's I tend to focus on more of its like more serious, darker aspects, so I don't think it doesn't spring to mind immediately when I think of comedy.
This past weekend, I watched the documentary Legend of Cocaine Island, which airs on Netflix, and I believe it was released in late March. So, Cocaine Island basically follows the story of Rodney Hayden and the events that led to his arrest back in 2012 for his attempts to obtain and distribute 32 kilograms of cocaine. And now this sounds like, maybe not that interesting of a story, but then you start hearing all the back information about it. So, number one, Rodney Hayden is essentially just was an extremely well off contractor who was hit hard by the Great Recession, and then number two, the 32 kilograms of cocaine he found was buried in the 1980s by one of his neighbors on an island in Puerto Rico.
Hmm.
Like I said, Rodney was so spoiler warnings to anyone watching this. I'm going to go through or listening to this. I'm going to go through this pretty in detail because I think the details are what make this a great story. So Rodney was a prominent real estate contractor who was hit really hard by the downturn in the Great Recession, and basically his family went from living a swank lifestyle to living on 40 acres and a trailer in Central Florida. And he's not a very athletic looking man. He's big, and I think this movie tries to make you feel a little bit sympathetic for him, but they like put him and his wife on screen and their daughter just to talk about how the recession hit them. And you hear just the excess amounts of spending there, doing they own boats, they own cars, they own big house, they put a pool in. And you have money, you can do what you want with it, but it does not sound like they saved all that well, because when the Great Recession hit, they ended up being $1 million in debt and had to really downsize. And then the wife was crying, I have to live on 40 acres in a trailer. And it's like, I know people who live in trailers who do not have 40 acres in Florida and who do not and have to, work multiple jobs. So I was not particularly moved by the sob story I think they're trying to portray on that front.
Yeah.
And I think they ultimately try and use that to be like, this is why he went for $2 million worth of cocaine. But at the end of the day, he tried to distribute a lot of drugs into the United States. So I don't feel that bad. Like, he had a house and stuff. It's not like he was on the streets. So while living in that 40 acres, he essentially had a lot of eccentric neighbors, and one of the neighbors liked to tell a story about how in the 1980s he found a duffel bag filled with cocaine that washed up on the beach in Puerto Rico. And so he was afraid to leave it there because he didn't want someone to find it, but he also didn't want to turn it over to the police because I guess they were supposed to be corrupt at that time. So he buried it outside of his trailer. And so the story is about how Rodney slowly starts to meet people who he also tells a story to, and they are more into the drug world and say, we can move this product. We should go after it because it's basically buried treasure.
Yeah, really.
So one character in this, well, not a character, he's a real person, is Rodney's friend Andy, who was basically a drug addict, and it looks like they shot this with him on one setting, and he seemed like he was on something, but he was hilarious. Him and Rodney are basically are buddies, and so Andy introduces Rodney to another drug dealer, and that drug dealer introduces him to another person they refer to as the Cuban, who was a drug trafficker, and then you start getting to the story of Rodney and Andy actually going down to Puerto Rico to dig up these drugs and see if it's really existing. And it just shows how incompetent they are in this world of really, I guess, anything involving drugs or going to other countries, because they spend all this money, fly to this island in Puerto Rico that's not easy to get to, and then realize they don't have any shovels to dig into the ground. So they just leave and head home and go back 2 weeks later with shovels.
At least they had a nice trip.
Yeah, right. Well, they do go into like how much they spent and stuff on that. And so they get back there with like 2 shovels and they start digging, trying to dig into it, and they realize that the ground's just really hard and you would need a backhoe or something to get out of. And, one of the guys digging is a recovering drug addict, and the other guy is extremely overweight. So it doesn't seem like they ever had a chance. And so they decide to give up, and they're heading home. And then, at one point while they're heading home, everyone gets pulled off the plane and they have drug dogs sniffing, and that really scares them. So Rodney's like, I'm done with this. I'm not chancing it. And so he starts ignoring the Cuban's calls and basically says he's washing his hand of it. But after a while, he eventually does answer a call, and the drug trafficker, the Cuban, offers him to. He says, "Look, if you just tell me where it is, like I'll double my take of it, but I'll still give you some money." And Rodney's like, "That's free money. I'm definitely going for it. I don't have to do anything involved in this."
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, number one, someone like what is preventing that guy from just taking the cocaine and running with it? Like, that's fishy right there.
Yeah, really.
And so eventually the Cuban does come back with the cocaine. He sends him a picture. And when Rodney goes to pick it up, the FBI or some federal agents, I don't know if it's the FBI or not, bust him for possession of large amounts of drug with intent to distribute, those kind of things. And it turns out the Cuban was an undercover agent, and Rodney had been flipped on and given that guy's name by one of the drug dealers who was trying to save himself from jail time.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, and so the end of the documentary essentially goes through their trial, and they're trying to make it seem like that Rodney was entrapped by this. He was found guilty of all charges, but he was only given 60 days in jail and 20 hours of community service for 5 years because of some lenient sentencing rules. And everyone's like, they entrapped him because he couldn't have pulled this off by himself, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, like, this guy did not go up to the federal agent. Like, he was around looking for people to try and sell it to. So I don't know. I don't really buy the entrapment thing. And it seems like he got off relatively easily for what he had been trying to distribute. I mean, 32 kilograms of cocaine is a lot. Like, I think that's like 70 some pounds.
Yeah, that's pretty intense.
And it's just crazy watching it because Rodney is basically like a hapless criminal, and he's probably lucky that he got in contact with a law enforcement official, because if he was like with a real criminal, I feel like the real criminal would have killed him or done worse. Like,
Definite possibility, yeah.
he brought nothing. Like, he brought nothing to the table except the location of the drugs. overall, I did really like this documentary, and it's a fun watch. They do some recreations of what was going on at the time, and they get actually Rodney to act as himself in it, and he does a pretty good job recreating it. And then they have other actors doing some of the other stuff, but then you do get interviews with people involved, and overall, really good. It's about an hour and 45 minutes. It's the lengths. It's crazy the lengths that some people go to for money, no matter how out of their element they are. Like it's insane.
Definitely true. Man, we definitely do love a true crime documentary on this show. This is becoming like a regular segment.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things like they're so interesting because the stories in them are just insane. Like real life is stranger than fiction sometimes.
Yeah, well, every single ones that we've done so far, it seems to be the same kind of like the more you peel back the layers, the wilder and wilder the story gets.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's what makes a good documentary, right? Like you need to be able to like I'm sure a lot of things have interesting facts, but the way you present it, if you can present it well, like it's fun to watch. This past weekend, Christian, you saw Shazam. I've not followed this really at all. I mean, I obviously know what it is because I've seen previews, but I've not heard anything. So how was it?
It was so 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 good. Like this is probably my favorite DC movie now.
Really?
Yeah, like I mean, honestly, the only good ones so far had been Wonder Woman and like a little bit Justice League, but this one was great.
Why do you think it was better than those ones?
I just Wonder Woman was really good, so maybe it's a tie. But this was just it was unexpected. It was advertised kind of as just a straight goofy comedy. It was just like so the plot is that this kid is chosen kind of at random to become a champion for kind of the light side of the force situation where he gets all the magic from this old wizard and he needs to use it to protect the world from the seven deadly sins, which in this case are like actual demons. And so in the previews for this movie, it's like I said, just kind of presented like a straight goofy comedy. It's about this kid who gets superpowers, and the superpowers turn him into a adult in like a big kind of situation, but he can turn back into a kid whenever he likes. And so he's just kind of this adult who is not at all mature in any capacity, but he has all these powers and he's not really sure how they work or what to do with them. But in the movie itself, things get a lot darker, especially once the demons are introduced, because it gets pretty intense in a lot of places, like surprisingly so.
So one question that I have because it was kind of bothering me in the previews is he wearing like a muscle suit in this?
That is an excellent question that I don't really have the answer to. It looks like he's probably wearing some kind of padding because I know what Zachary Levi looks like, and Zachary Levi plays Shazam, the main character, and he is definitely not that. So he must be either wearing something or he's heavily CG'd.
Okay, because I was wondering because that's the one thing I remember seeing that in previews and thinking, are we going back to like the '90s where you pad the suits? Because like you said, I like Zachary Levy in Chuck, and he's not that big of a guy.
Yeah, no. So yeah, the way he moves is a little awkward. So I think they may have padded the suit a little bit.
Okay, I was just wondering. And so who's the main villain in this?
It's Mark Strong. He has a real strange name, but it's not Sinestro because that's the bad guy for Green Lantern, but it's something similar. He's like a billionaire who spent his life trying to prove that these magicians and demons are real, and then he finally succeeds and kind of becomes like a host for all seven of them. They live inside his right eyeball.
Interesting. So I'm not too well versed with the DC universe and specifically Shazam. I don't know much about him. So I originally thought the Black Adam being played by The Rock was supposed to be the villain in it. So I'm guessing that was not the case.
Yeah, no, definitely not in this. They do tease a like the next movie in kind of Marvel fashion with a mid-credit scene, but even that is even stranger one. I mean, the thing they tease in this one is like a sentient worm. I can't remember what his name is, but he wears like He looks like a caterpillar, and he wears a little box around his neck that lets him speak English.
Weird. I'm gonna have to look into this because I'm not sure who that is even referencing to.
Yeah, it's Mr. Master might be his name. I don't know. He's like a genius worm from Venus, I think.
Do you think the DC cinematic universe is actually going to continue? I mean, I know Batman, Ben Affleck's out as Batman, and they're working on the Joker movie now. Do you think it's still going to be in disarray, or do you think they'll be able to pull it together because you actually like Shazam? There's some hope that they can take it in a correct direction.
Um, I guess there's some hope. Wonder Woman 1984 will be coming out next year, or no, I think it's actually this fall. I think it's this fall. So that'll probably be the one that's going to be make or break. I know Flash is still scheduled for 2020. That's probably too late to pull, but I think if Shazam does really well, and by all accounts, it seems to be doing pretty well so far, and if Wonder Woman 1984 does pretty well, I think they might be able to pull out of the tailspin that they're in. They also have a movie coming out next spring that's kind of the Suicide Squad sequel. It was originally supposed to just be a straight Suicide Squad 2, but they changed direction a little bit on that, and probably rightfully so. So that one's called, oh god, it's a terrible title. It's The Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Liberation of Harley Quinn, I think it's called.
Oh, this is the Harley Quinn movie. Okay, yeah.
So Birds of Prey is like the daughter of Batman, which I don't think in this universe he has a daughter. So I'm not really sure where they're going with that. And yeah, Harley Quinn's getting another movie because Hot Topic needs to sell more things. We'll see how the next couple movies go. I'd like to see it continue. I think there are some DC stories that I'd like to see. I'd just like to see it continue not the way that it had began.
You know what's kind of, I think, a little bit sad from the DC side is since probably the Nolan Batman trilogy, I think Suicide Squad has probably been the most culturally significant of the DC universe just because I feel like people got really into like Harley Quinn and that kind of thing where people were all about Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, but I like people didn't you didn't see it in normal fashion. Like I saw people dressing up as Harley Quinn or with those shirts or whatever, you know.
Yeah. Well, it did win an Academy Award.
Did it really?
Yep. Hair and makeup, I think.
Huh, I didn't realize that. I mean, also just might be the selective group of people that I'm around. So I don't know. I might be wrong on that.
But yeah, Shazam was surprisingly good. Like I wasn't sure what to expect going in. I thought it was either going to be funny or it was going to be dumb, and it ended up being really funny in parts, like really, really funny, but also pretty, like I said, pretty intense in other parts. It was a surprising success.
How's it? How has its box office been?
It made 56.8 million, just shy of $57 million, and that's just this weekend. This was its opening weekend. Its budget was 100 million, so it made half its budget back in week one. So it's doing pretty well. Like it's definitely going to make its budget back over time. And I feel like once word of mouth spreads about how good it is, it's going to have some staying power. And word is spreading because on Rotten Tomatoes, it's sitting at a 90%.
Well, that's pretty high, especially for the DC universe. I don't think too many other movies have gotten up that high.
Yeah, I think the critic score I think was 90 and the audience score was 91. It was one or the other, but they were right on top of each other in the low 90s.
I want to maybe check this out then. I was going to pass it on it, but seeing you say it's good and seeing as the critic scores are good, I might try and check this out when I get some free time. I've basically, I think, given up on the DC cinematic universe until they present something that I feel like wins me back because I don't know. I've generally just been a little bit disappointed with their stuff.
Yeah, I mean this could be it. It was really good. Just one other thing about Shazam that I didn't know until I had looked it up right after I watched it. I was just kind of googling stuff about Shazam because he's an interesting character. Well, first of all, Shazam is an acronym. Each of the letters of the name signifies like a deity or a figure of mythology that he gets power from. So, like the Z is Zeus, which means he can control lightning, and the H is Hercules, which makes him super strong, and so on and so on. So that was neat. But in the original DC comics, his name was Captain Marvel.
That's right. I remember hearing that at one point. Also, wasn't he like three kids at one point too who combined?
He's a foster child that lives in a group home, and he gifts his power to each of the other 6 kids. So there's like 7 of them at a certain point.
It's like a cool concept for a hero because it is, you have the standard powers, but then the actual backside story of him is way more interesting than I think you generally get.
Yeah, this like I said, it was good all the way through. I was really happy.
This past week, I platinumed the game Nier Automata, and I talked a little bit about it last week, but I finally finished it all up, so I wanted to give my final thoughts. So Nier Automata is a 2017 game released by Platinum Games, and it is available, I believe, on everything PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Windows. It is an open world action RPG following essentially the story of two androids by the name of 2B and 9S, and those stand for things like 9S is a support unit, and 2B is a battle unit. So the backstory of this is that there are thousands of years in the future, and at some point in the Earth's history, aliens come to Earth and attack by creating a machine army, and it essentially forces the humans off of the planet, and they build an army of androids to help them try and retake the planet while they live on the moon. You take control of 2B and 9S as they're going onto Earth and fighting their way through essentially tons of machines and trying to win the Earth back for the humans. But then while you're actually going through this game, it gets into a really cool like narrative and deep subjects like what is free will, can machines and androids or things like that develop it, why are they really fighting in the end, because they have no stake in the game other than their masters who created them to do this. And it's really cool. As you go through, you start finding machines who have disconnected from like the network that makes them violent, and they basically start acting like humans and creating families even though they really shouldn't. And you really get to explore a lot of the world through the side missions in this game, which normally I find that side missions in open world games be kind of boring and fetch questy. But there are some of these in here that, even though they're pretty basic what they're asking you to do, I really like the story associated with it. Like one of it is a mom having you save her machine son, and it's just so weird because, they're machines. There should be no familial bonds. Or it's you're going around the world finding this philosopher machine's followers, and it's just them saying nonsense and just seeing how they interact and are slowly gaining consciousness and things like that. And it's so well done.
Yeah, it sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, and what's really interesting too is this game has 26 endings,
Oh wow.
and you can get them at any time, either after playing the game through 3 times, or you can get them within, I think, the first 20 or 30 minutes of a game, where the game's like, okay, you got to do something, and if you fail to do it or you just leave the battlefield or whatever, like it'll give you an ending. And some of the endings are pretty cool. Because you're an android, like you level up by getting operating system chips that you put in to like make your movement increase, or if you want to be able to see enemies health, you put that chip in and it takes up like so much space in your slots. Or you can take it away if you don't care about that, so you don't have to have a mini map, or you can. But there's one chip in there called like your OS, so if you take it off and destroy it, like you actually die. Like that's the game and you get the ending.
Huh.
But otherwise, if you're playing it how it's generally meant to be played, this game has you have to play through it 3 times, but really it's 3 parts of a whole game. So it's weird how they break it down. The first playthrough you play is 2B, who is just a battle unit. And that's your playthrough one. And you're like, okay, I'm done with the game. And then you play as 9S, and it's essentially you replay 2B's run, but from 9S's perspective, and you open up a couple new side missions. And 9S is also like a hacking unit, so it introduces a little bit new gameplay. And then you play through it a third time, but you're playing with someone who's completely different, A2, and it's basically a sequel to what happens in the first 2 playthroughs as 2B and 9S, where you're playing parallel stories of A2 and 9S to the actual completion of the game, and then you actually have to beat it again to get like the final ending or whatever. But so there's like a lot of stuff involved in it, but I'm not going to lie, like I really enjoyed every minute I played of this. It's open world to like a certain extent, where they have X number of areas you can visit, but it's not like huge. They don't take that long to get from point A to point B, and you open up fast travel like halfway through the game. So I don't think it's a truly open world game, but it is pretty open.
Yeah, this sounds pretty cool. I might have to check this out.
Yeah, I would say this is probably the best action RPG on the on this generation of consoles. What I really thought was a negative for this game at first, but then I learned a little bit more about it, was there's this really interesting mechanic where if you're into buying trophies and whatnot, you can actually buy the trophies with in-game currency. So anything that's not story related, if you don't want to grind it out, you can buy it, which is kind of awesome. I bought, I think, like 4 or 5 of the trophies because I didn't want to do like a fishing index and things like that. But I did most of the side missions because they're just were added so much to the story. But it is nice to not have to 100% a game and get some of it. I don't think many games will incorporate that mechanic, but it basically saved me like 20 or 30 hours of playtime. So I totally went for it. So it's not a completely clean platinum on my part.
Yeah, I mean, still, you can't argue with that.
Overall, though, like I was saying, I think this is probably the best action RPG on the current generation of consoles. It does have one weird mechanic where it's like, well, not mechanic, just it's an aesthetic where the main character you play at the beginning is sort of in like a maid costume, and it's like a totally Japanese game. So if for whatever reason like that bothers you, and you can work past that, I think the game's totally worth it. But I think that's what turns some people off is they just don't really like the art direction, or they think it's some weeb game or something, and they didn't really give it the time of day. But really, it's pretty fun. And if I had to give it a rating, I definitely think I would put this at like an A. Definitely one of the top games for the current generation, but I don't think it's like one of the best games of all time. But it is something I suggest the listeners check out. Unfortunately, I think it hasn't really gone down in price because it's more of a niche game. Like I got my copy for I think $35, so I think you'll probably get it around there, even though it's 2 years old at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that's still not bad, especially when you're looking at the standard being like 60.
No, it's not bad. But I know like some games that have come out, it's like, oh, like I could get this for like $20, and that's not the case with this one. And on to video game news, the most interesting thing that I think happened in the last week was Jason Schreier over at Kotaku released a really good article on what went wrong with Anthem. And if anyone is interested in it, you can either check it out on Kotaku or we posted it on our Twitter. And it is an in depth look into how BioWare terribly mishandled the rollout of Anthem for like 6 years. And I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. Christian, did you by chance read this article?
I did not, actually.
So the basic premise is, we talked about Anthem before. It had a really botched rollout, and it still has problems to this day. And so the article talked to, I think it was 19 different people who were involved with Anthem at one point or another who worked for BioWare. And on the internet, a lot of people had been claiming that, this is EA's fault because they pushed for whatever monetization. And I'm sure they did to a certain extent. But the article really makes it seem like that Anthem was a failure on BioWare's leadership's part because they could not choose a direction for the game for 6 years. I think it was in production since like 2012. And they said that they did not start building the final build of the game until after their E3 trailer announcement, which I think was in 2017. So they basically built the game in like 18 months. And it's a huge game. And really damning to the BioWare team was they were basically like, we're not creating a game like Destiny, which they totally ended up creating a game like Destiny, and they would not let like their team try and borrow any ideas from Destiny. So that's why you see them run into a lot of same problems that this Destiny and the Division did. And it's just like really like a study and how probably not to go about releasing a game. Like it's easier for me to say obviously because I'm not in that industry, but it's not a good look on BioWare.
Now, I did hear, is it true that the game, they had to change the title, like, with no time left to go?
Yes, so its original title I believe was Beyond, but they couldn't copyright it or trademark it or something, or there was some issue with it on legal. So they made them change the name to Anthem like right before their announcement. Like they had printed T-shirts and stuff with the old name on it, and then they had to incorporate later on into the story why this was called Anthem. Yeah, so it just was a huge mess. It seems like in development they're trying to get everything fixed up, but in a way that continues not to look good for them. Once they released this article, Anthem essentially released a blog post saying they don't pay attention to detractors in the industry trying to bring them down. Wouldn't really like I don't think game journalists are detractors. Like this was a pretty I think unbiased article. Like and I like Jason Schreier's work. I read his book Blood, Sweat and Pixels, but they did not respond to it well. Like they could take no, they still doesn't seem like they can take any criticism or own up to that. They really just botched getting this game out.
Yeah, you gotta own your mistakes.
Yeah, I mean one of the generally praised mechanics of Anthem has been like the flying's fun in it and the gunplay is good. They originally were not going to have flying in the game. Like they had builds where they took it out and they only put it in to impress one of the EA bosses because they showed him like the original build without, and he said this is horrible, and they had to essentially create a new build in 2 weeks. And then they did the flying, and he liked it, so they couldn't take it out anymore. Like it's insane that they weren't going to include that.
Yeah, this sounds like it was just a mess, like from the beginning.
Yeah, it sucks because like I kind of want to check this game out, but I do not want to pay like $60 for it. It's one of those where I wish they had a demo so I could see just how bad it was, but I'm totally not going to pay for this. All right, guys, and now for a new segment, we're going to kick it over to Adam for a weekly sports update.
Hi, my name is Adam Wainer, and this is your sports update from April 1st to April 8th, 2019. In college basketball, the Final Four went down with Virginia defeating Auburn 63-62. There was controversy surrounding a non-call double dribble in the last 3 seconds. Kyle Guy from Virginia hit 3 free throws with 0.6 seconds left to secure the win for Virginia. Texas Tech defeated Michigan State 61-51. In the NCAA championship, Virginia defeated Texas Tech 85-77 in overtime, with securing the first championship in school history for Virginia, and 1 year removed from them being the first number 1 seed to lose to a number 16 seed in the NCAA tournament. In the NBA, Dwayne Wade completed his farewell tour with the Miami Heat, and for some reason, Paul Pierce was jelly all over the media. Russell Westbrook recorded the second ever 20-20-20 game with 20 points, 20 rebounds, and 21 assists. Will Chamberlain was the only other person to do it in NBA history. In the NHL, the playoffs are set with Columbus taking on Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh taking on the Islanders, Toronto taking on Boston, Carolina taking on Washington, St. Louis taking on Winnipeg, Dallas taking on Nashville, Vegas taking on San Jose, and Colorado taking on Calgary. Nikita Kucherov finishes the NHL points leader with 128, and Alexander Ovechkin the goals leader with 51. And the MLB Futility is the name of the game, with Boston, Kansas City, Oakland, Miami, Cincinnati, and San Francisco all bringing up the tail end of their respective divisions. Chris Davis from Baltimore set the MLB record for longest hitless streak by a position player, going 0-for-47 dating back to last September. At WrestleMania, Becky Lynch defeated Ronda Rousey and Charlotte Flair to become the Women's Unified Champion. Kofi Kingston defeated Daniel Bryan to win the WWE Championship, becoming the first black WWE superstar to ever win a world championship. And women's college basketball, Baylor defeated Notre Dame to win the national championship. And in cornhole, Matt Guy is the new number 1 ranked player in the world, according to the American Cornhole League. I'm Adam Wainwright, and I like sports, and I don't care who knows.
Alright guys, now it's time to play our Amazon review game. Just a quick recap of the rules. Christian's going to read me a 5-star Amazon review for a movie. I will get 2 yes or no questions to try and guess what the movie is. I can then ask for another review. I will then get 2 more yes or no questions, and I can ask for 1 final review and 2 more questions that then I have to guess. I am ready when you are, Christian.
Alright. Review number 1. I originally bought the 1080p HD version on Prime Video, and I was so blown away by this movie I purchased it a second time in 4K just to get the most out of the stunning visual. If I had known how good this was going to be, I'd have just sprung for the 4K in the first place. No matter the resolution, it looks amazing either way. A lot of people have been complaining about the style, saying it's blurry and jerky or unfinished. I disagree. This is an astonishing stylistic choice, and it paid off, giving it a unique and experimental feel that looks more like a book than any other movie. I'm really glad it won a well-deserved award for its work. As much as I liked Incredibles 2 and Isle of Dogs, it exceeded my expectations.
Is this a superhero movie?
It is.
I'm like thinking Into the Spider-Verse, but I don't know if that's actually been released yet. Those two, Isle of Dogs. What else was this year? I'm guessing this is in the best animation category. There was Wreck-It Ralph 2, and there was Spider-Man in the Spider-Verse. Is this a Spider-Man movie?
Yes.
Is this Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse?
It was. Oh man, it's too easy.
Yeah, I mean, once you said the 2 year ones, I was like, oh, I actually paid attention this year. I didn't know that was released on DVD already.
Yeah, it came out like a week ago, I think.
Man, I should get that. That movie was so good.
Yeah. I was trying to spring for like a Marvel one or a superhero one that wasn't an MCU, and then I was like, oh man, this just came out.
I was going to had it have stopped with like it won an award and it was a book, I don't think I would have got it there because I was like, I feel like this is either like my initial thought was that movie it was all from like the first person perspective though. Hardcore Henry or something like that.
Yes. Oh, I forgot about that movie.
Yeah, I heard like tons of stuff about that camera supposed to be jerky, so that was like my initial thought. All right, guys, thanks for checking out our episode. Before we head out, Christian, what are you going to be checking out this week?
Well, I'm gonna be getting real heavy into my my Marvel watching. I know we've got our 2-part Marvel episodes coming up next week and the week after, so I've got to get at least up to Age of Ultron this week. We'll see how close I get. Hellboy comes out on the 12th, so as much as I'm not expecting it to be very good, I'm sure I'm gonna watch it. That's probably about it.
Dude, I did not realize Hellboy was coming out. I really liked Ron Perlman Hellboy.
Yeah, so did I. So we'll see how David Harbour does.
Yeah, I'm actually I haven't seen anything about it, so I'm pretty excited about that. I hope it's good. So this upcoming week, I too am going to be watching a lot of Marvel movies over the next 2 weeks. I am up to halfway through Thor: The Dark World, and I'm actually pretty happy we're doing this. Like, I'm totally reorienting my list of what I thought was good versus what I thought was bad on this. So it's really interesting, especially to see like the story in one go instead of watching one movie every 6 months or whatever for 11 years.
Yeah, I definitely get that.
Otherwise, I am trying to figure out what game to start next. I'm at a point where I don't have like in my backlog, it's not a lot of games I really want to play right now, or I'm not in the mood. Like I have Dragon Ball Xenoverse, which is basically like 80 more hours left until I platinum it, so I'm not really motivated to play it. And I also need to get like an online trophy that is going to be really hard to do, so that kind of kills my motivation. Similarly, Titanfall has a really hard one, or Titanfall 2 has a really hard one. So I just don't know what I'm going to get into. I think I need to pick like a shorter game or something like that, because otherwise I'll burn myself out. Like some of those games are not meant to be played a ton in a short period of time.
Yeah.
So if anyone has suggestions, I am open for them. I'm really trying hard. Like I've been wanting to play a game like Anthem, like a third person base guarding game, but I haven't found one yet like worth it. And I was thinking maybe I would try like Fortnite's Save the World mode or whatever, but it's still like $40. I don't want to pay that to see if I like it when it's going to maybe be free this year.
Yeah, really.
All right, guys, thanks for checking out our episode. If you would like to give a suggestion for the Amazon Review Game or reach us in any way, you can reach us on Twitter. We are at Gambots Network, or you can email us. We are gambots.blog@gmail.com. I just want to give a little heads up on where I am actually currently watching the Marvel movies if you do not want to pay for them. I'm using openloadfreetv.me. That's, I think, the easiest place I've been able to find them. Otherwise, you can rent them on Amazon Prime, but a lot of the early ones are not on any streaming services right now.
Yeah, I know a lot of the newest ones are on Netflix. Like I know Infinity War, Ant-Man and Wasp, Ragnarok. I'm not sure how far back it goes. I think Black Panther's on there. But I know by the time you hit Age of Ultron, I think they're already missing from Netflix.
Yeah, I know they're on Netflix in batches, and they had like a so many year contract, and Disney's not been renewing them. So I will be excited once I get onto Netflix because I can watch them on my TV again. But otherwise, all right, guys, thanks for listening.
Thank you.